I had a best friend called Madeline. We met each other quite early on in junior school. At first, Madeline was quiet and sensitive, but when we were together, there was always so much energy. We spent all of our time playing together and eating lunch together. It even got to a point where we created our own language, and as you can expect, that really began to annoy our teachers. I found out her dad was sick, and she told me that from quite early on. Some kind of cancer that she never really wanted to talk about. While other kids wanted to go home and play with their new toys and meet up with their friends, Madeline just wanted to go home and see her dad. I think for her, being around me was an escape. We became so good at taunting the popular kids in our class, knowing that we'll never be part of their circle. We'd stick to our outdated music and vintage fashion, following in the pop rock icons that came before us. Even in the dead of the winter, I'd wait patiently for her at the school gates, and I'd smile from ear to ear as I saw her car come up the road. On the rare occasion that he could get out of bed, Madeleine's dad was sat in the passenger seat. He'd whisper something in her ear and a tear would roll down her cheek. And then she'd rush over coming to me. And the pranks and the trouble that we get into would just grow more and more each and every time. Madeleine had 3 older sisters, and there was some distance between them as there was a 7-year age gap and they were quite different. As we got older, the distance grew more and more, and as they ventured off into the world of work and university and they left, Madeline and I would become sisters. We'd spend so much time together, smoking when we shouldn't have been, making blood bonds together and going to those gigs that we always planned to, our bucket list gigs we called them. We'd drag her dad along even as he had some years left in him. We always wanted to see the Smiths together. Madeline always found time for me, even with the burdens of her home life always being compared to her older sisters. Her mother would taunt her saying, "Madeline, what's the point? You'll never be as good as them." She would always make time for me, even at 2 a.m. when I'd call her saying that I couldn't go to sleep because my mind was too busy. She'd reassure me that everything would be okay. Even when my dad would get a little bit too drunk after watching the football, we'd have such intense arguments about that, and I'd worry that she'd get fed up and leave, but Madeline wasn't like that. We got over those arguments pretty quickly. Over time, Madeline and I found things to do in our spare time outside of our friendship, like boys, weed, alcohol, sex with all the wrong people, all the while trying to pass A-level history together. Sometimes, as I'd pass her in the college corridor, I'd wonder if she remembered all the things we did while we were kids, like bike rides in the autumn time, sleepovers every other weekend, going to theme parks and eating so much sugar that we'd eventually crash on the car ride home. We were just kids, and we had no idea. That was until year 13, when she finally came up and told me that her dad had died. After the funeral, we decided to go on holiday together, train hopping across Europe. In Rome, we got hit on by this Italian guy. He was so incredibly charming and sweet about Madeleine's little flowers embroidered on her dress. Little did he know she did it all herself. She turned to me, smiled, and then turned back at him and said, "I like you, boy, but you're no Gino." We went to the Louvre together and joked about painting each other. I was so incredibly anxious to go back home. knowing that we'd be starting university soon. She was my sister. I couldn't deal with the distance and time spent away from each other. I told her that her dad would be proud of her, and that I miss him incredibly too. She told me at the summer of 2019, before we started university, as long as we keep writing to each other, keep the postcards, there is nothing on God's green earth that can keep us apart. Believe me that. We never talked again. I stopped texting, and she never did. We never saw the Smiths together. I made some new friends, Chloe, Stephen and Ruth. Bella in second year always made sure to never leave me out. Always invited me for parties and sharing her drinks. We became pretty good friends quite quickly as well, but she wasn't Madeleine. I began to lose count of all the times where I opt out for takeout instead of making dinner, panicking about doing my laundry because I had no more clothes, downing my 378 tequila shot of the year, and the 5 times I got deathly ill, starting with freshers flu in September. And there is not one day that goes by where I don't think of Madeleine. I loved her. I wonder if she ever thinks of me. I constantly think about calling her. I constantly sit here comfortably, thinking about all the good old days, and wonder, maybe it's for the better.